Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Jessica Jones, aka the Cryptid Huntress, has once again found her way into the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. We are about to read another chapter of the infamous Midnight Society book. Much better. Thank you for allowing me to replenish lost nutrients. I'm still so hungry, but no worries. I will finish feasting later. Without further ado, it is time for the Midnight Society and Jessica Jones to take a walk into the darkness.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, leaves reborn, fury rise, health ignites, burning rays, endless nights.
I looked into the eyes of this Dogman. There was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Milk road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beast reborn, fury rise,
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. I do hope everyone had a very spooky Halloween and is ready for some more information on the Dogman. And remember, this is the home and the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. And we, again, are going to read a chapter from our secret book around the late night fire and burn the timber with, of course, Jessica Jones, aka the Cryptid Huntress. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. As usual, how are you?
Excellent. It's always great to sit down with you and figure out this gnarly stuff that's going on. And I've been really busy just editing and diving into some interesting stuff on Halloween that I was putting out some content, and also the Day of the Deceased. I was reading about a lot of that and some interesting stuff for sure. What have you been up to?
Yeah, lots of shows and interviews and getting out in the field. Oh, the same old, same old. But yeah, just really diving deep into a lot of really crazy current events that we got going on right now. I haven't covered Dogman so much the past couple of weeks as I have all these people that are showing up on television that are like shape-shifting and stuff, like celebrities dressing up like reptilians for Halloween, and some people are saying they're showing their true form and things like that. I try to keep my ear to the street and or to the streets, and I kind of hop on the current events for my shows. It's really been based around a lot of shapeshifters and weird things that are out in the public right now. So that's what I've been up to. I've been chasing down shapeshifters and stuff. So keeping it fun, keeping it real.
That's straight up gnarly stuff right there. And I mean, all that is occurring is pretty nightmare fuel based stuff for sure, but I will not front a skinwalker and Wendigo in my eyes is much scarier to confront or deal with than a dogman. I mean, a cynocephali slash dogman, yeah, sure, those are pretty scary, but you want to start adding in some magic and stuff like that and some demonic potential. Yeah, I'm all set with that stuff. So I can only imagine some of the gnarly things that you've been discovering. Because I mean, I only really focus on the Dogman, but I love to learn in general. And recently, I've been learning so much gnarly stuff surrounding potential Dogman activity and maybe some of the historical aspects. And like tonight, you have a really interesting topic to dive into. And before I throw you the mic, I have something to stir the pot a little bit because the cynocephali, which I've spoken about before, and we have 290 BC is give or take around the time frame they first make a reference to that, okay? And well, Cestius, Herodotus, Alexander the Great all described them as a very hefty war-based culture, more or less, and that they were savage warriors and they didn't really have an allegiance, okay? They weren't good or bad, meaning in human terminologies, okay? They just pretty much did what they pleased and what would have benefited them more. They would speak about teaming up more or less with the cynocephali, which seemed to be something they were way more thrilled about than having to go against them, because according to Cestius and the rest of them, they were tremendous warriors as well. So yeah, it probably doesn't seem like something you would want to go up against, but just like in, human culture or animals or anything, there's different behaviorisms. So most likely you're going to have with the cynocephali as well, that there were different ones, more that were probably cordial and laid back, and then more that were not about that life. So now they lived in caves, right? And you were speaking about some of the potential aspects that are occurring underground. So we know that they did dwell there. And also, not just our science team here at the NADP, there are some other really great scientists out there that have some information that still, sits in the category of a hypothesis, because you got to get up to the theory, which potentially maybe they could, but well, the cynocephali was a great culture at one point in time, and they fell just like every other great culture. Well, a lot of people out there are seemingly thinking that some of these great structures that potentially maybe the Greeks or Romans inherited, or maybe the Egyptians, might have actually belonged to, say, the cynocephali culture previous to that, and they could have actually been here before us, or evolving, beside us as well. And I thought that was really interesting to bring into the topic that you're going to speak about. So I'm going to throw you the mic right now.
Okay, wow. Absolutely. All of that is right along the lines of what we're going to talk about tonight. I've been doing a lot of research, having guests on my shows that are talking about the deep underground military bases. And some people have inside knowledge of it, some have personal firsthand knowledge of these underground bases. But there was a whistleblower back in 1985 named Phil Schneider. And a lot of people who, especially are in the UFO community and the cryptid community, were very familiar with Mr. Schneider. Now, he did pass away. They said that it was I guess we can call it self-deletion, is what we call it on YouTube, of course. But the way that he passed away was not a way that a person could actually do that to himself. Okay, so I'm going to get into this tonight because back in September of 1995, Phil Schneider gave a presentation at the Preparedness Expo where he exposed let's just say let's say the NWO. Okay, the NWO, if you know what that is, on their plan and what they're doing right now is what he said is has to do with the extraterrestrials here on our planet that are underground in these deep underground military bases. Now, he was actually showing during this presentation, he showed evidence of alien metals and artifacts and photographs of extraterrestrials and things that have to do with the extraterrestrials. Now, I'm bringing up the extraterrestrial aspect because I do know that I've had Jody Cook from the NADP on my show last year, and he talked about I think he took a report where he talked to someone who had said that they had seen or encountered dogmen on a UFO craft, like some sort of a spacecraft at some point. I do believe that there are dogmen that have been seen. And I know someone personally who was part of the secret space program who said that he was on a mission in the secret space program and was in a spacecraft with dog men, he said. Humanoid dog men is what he said. His name is Tony Rodriguez, very well-known secret space program survivor. So if your audience is interested in him, in that story, you can look up Tony Rodriguez online. His story is there. He speaks at a lot of public events and conferences and talks about his experience. Now, let's get back to Phil Schneider. Okay, so he does this presentation back in 1985 And less than 6 months later, he was found deceased in his apartment with a piano wire wrapped around his neck, which a lot of people would say that that was not him that did that, but it was ruled a self-deletion, if you know what I mean. Okay, well, what he did in this presentation, what he presented was mind-blowing. Okay, it was mind-blowing. And he got into the facts. Now these are facts behind the deep underground military bases. He said that he had worked extensively on building deep underground military bases, better known as DUMBs. He claimed that the information about aliens is well kept, very much hidden from the public, and that the U.S. military has known about the presence of aliens at least since 1909. He also said that over $500 billion is allocated every year. This is back in 1995. That was 30 years ago. Imagine what it is now. He said that it was allocated every year to black projects dealing with alien matters. He also said that 28% of the U.S. gross national product was being spent on building underground bases, which I can believe, back in 1995, 30 years ago. And the black budget sidesteps Congress completely. So they don't have to get approval from Congress for all of this. Okay, this is a black budget. But in 1995, 30 years ago, there were 131 active deep underground military bases in the U.S. and approximately 1,477 underground bases in the world. And each base cost an average of about $19 billion back in 1995. That's a lot more today. And it took about 2 years to construct the use of these underground military bases using technology that melts rocks. They use lasers, it turns the rock to powder, they smooth out the tunnels. All right, so they're massive. They house thousands upon thousands of people, and they are connected by magnet trains. They're called magneto-leviton trains, and they go from dumb to dumb, deep underground military base to deep underground military base, around Mach 2 or higher. He says that there's a whole other world down there filled with both human and alien forms. He also said there are different types of aliens. He said that there are 9 races of alien beings that he knows of, which use humans as a food source. All right, I only wanted to bring all of this up as a precursor about things that he had experienced in this base. He claims that dogmen are down in these bases as well, what appear to be dog-headed men. He's actually witnessed dogmen fighting the reptilians down there. Now, reptilians are something else that I'm very familiar with. I've done many shows on them. I've had people who have encountered reptilians, people who have a lot of knowledge on reptilians on my shows. He said that he's actually seen them fighting down there, and the dogmen fight the reptilians with swords, like katanas. Okay, and that they're very skilled at katana. So I just thought that was really interesting. Now, the alien races that do consume humans, by the way, he did not specify that the dogmen are a race of those aliens, but he did say that they use this secretion from the glands of humans and animals for the mixture of vitamins in their food, and some alien races do get high off of their adrenaline. So if you do follow the news, things like that, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it tonight. That's the thing, and that's what's going on underground in some of these underground military bases. And dogmen are included here. I've gotten multiple accounts, multiple encounters that have been reported with dogmen being in these DUMBs. You know, I do that remote viewing targets a lot, and I do shows on remote viewing. I'm given blind targets, which do ultimately involve deep underground military bases. A lot of times it's just counters or cryptids, but in the environment is what I'm detecting when I'm remote viewing it. And I do usually stumble across deep underground military bases and facilities where they are creating and working with chimeras and animal-human hybrids of some sort. Not to say that those are all dogmen, okay, but dogmen, sometimes my targets are dogmen encounters. They are associated with some of these underground military bases. So I just thought it was important for us to talk about that. I think it's a really interesting subject. And yes, I do believe that dogmen are underground in these facilities, most likely working with either our military or with some sort of agency that's down there underground.
Dang, that's some pretty gnarly stuff right there. And that just adds a little bit more nightmare fuel to the fire that it just keeps exploding, eh? And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that gentleman worked on the Denver airport, and I believe he was an engineer. And he had spoken about, yeah, just how there was a ton of areas underneath there that connected to other spots. And a lot of people don't realize that in the Denver airport, there are some really strange paintings and sculptures and depictions of animal-headed hominoids. And I learned a really gnarly and I guess interesting fact about how in Castle Hauska in the Czech, when they would summon these demons or entities, and also the SS and Heinrich Himmler and the Nasty Stash referred to this as well, that they would reek of sulfur. And when they would come up out of this deep hole, that these demonic entities that they would supposedly summon all were humanish, but had animal heads and animal body parts and such. So I found that to just be pretty interesting and figured I would inform you of that as well, just to add a little bit more interesting to the topic that is already considered completely interesting.
That is interesting. Wow. Yeah. Anytime that there's something that does smell like sulfur and stuff, it is associated with the demonic. So that would make sense. But of course, when we're out in the field, a lot of times we'll smell things that smell bad, and that's associated with Bigfoot. Okay, it's associated with Bigfoot. Not so much Dogman, but mostly Bigfoot. I do not believe that all Bigfoots are demonic by any means,
Of course not.
but that sulfuric smell does. I've smelled it before. I have been in places where it reeked of sulfur, even in haunted homes and haunted houses and stuff. I've had that. That's very valid. So yeah, it's important that we are aware of that. Interesting.
Right? So that's why also when you see, again, as far as I know, any sort of animal-headed hominoid, I don't specialize in this, but I know your friend Dennis Carroll and our buddy here at Midnight Society, he's really good with the occult and biblical history. Like I'm spiritual, but I don't know much about that until people such as himself have introduced it to me. But according to him, there really is no sort of positive depiction, I guess, of animal-headed beings, meaning they all seem to come from some sort of demonic type aspect, like the summoning. But then, according to the Greeks and Romans and stuff, with the cynocephali, I mean, they're dog-headed or dog humanoid creatures, didn't have any sort of demonic type aspects to them. I mean, they came down from the mountains. I mean, it took them a while to walk down to trade with them. So, I mean, if they were magical, they would have just hopped in a portal or something, but they didn't. And they were unalived, just like, the Romans were, but it took more. And they would trade with them, literally, I mean, give you something and you would take it from them and they would, exchange and such. So, they all seem to be something that is physical and not really necessarily manifested. And again, like we were speaking about earlier, they don't really seem to have an allegiance, okay? They don't really seem to, I guess, care about the human way of what's good or bad. I mean, it seems to be, if something benefits them, they would back whatever side benefits them. So that, I guess, would be the only time I really would see an entity that was animal headed or hominoid animal based. That's not negative. I mean, do you know of any others or?
Well, I can say that through some of my research, I've looked at old world maps, and it does appear as though that there were civilizations and communities of dog-headed men, the cynocephali. There were communities of all sorts of strange creatures. Okay, it wasn't just dog-headed men. We had things like blimmies. Okay, civilizations, communities of them on depicted on these maps, and it was just they were just a people. It was like a race of people, basically. It's like, I'm not going to say humans, but a race of humanoids. But they're depicted on these maps. They don't look as though that they were, demonic, portrayed as being that. They look like they were just here. They were just like you and I, normal members of society, I guess. I don't know. It would have been great. It would have been really cool to have lived back then, to have been able to experience that, because that's not like anything we're aware of. I mean, I just have recently done a couple of shows on, the mud flood, and I know that's kind of controversial, but we're really diving into human resets and our history not being exactly what our history really is. It's what we're told and what's in our books. It's just not what we're taught. And anything, if we stray off of that path and we talk about things like you and I are talking about tonight, there are people that are out here in this world that are going to make fun of us and laugh and, kind of like to put us back in our place and tell us to shut up because we're crazy. I got to say, I think that it's important that we do explore this alternative history, because I think alternative history might be our real history.
Preach, my friend. And as a journalist, I just feel like my job is to collect data. And as stated before, I of course have opinions on topics, but unless somebody, is like, "Hey, Star Fox, what do you think about this?" Then I enunciate it. But behind the scenes, I'm just gathering data and filtering through it and nerding out and geeking out and just trying to crunch the numbers that make sense as to, okay, well, where does this fall? I mean, what are the facts here? What are quality details? What are questionable? And once I start to filter through all that, then, I can send it off to my science team and other people that I value their opinions on things I have no clue about, right? And then I gather more information from that. And to be a good journalist, and like William White from our science team says, to be a good scientist, you can't put the pieces into what you want to be the theory. Okay. You need to start with a hypothesis, and whatever is showing the data for that, it could be something you want to be true that could be super awesome, but it could also be something that's catastrophic that you don't want to be true. But as the pieces start to plug in, you need to make sure that you're being true to that and not leaving out certain details or a certain narrative that allows it to then be placed into the topic that you want it to be placed in. That's like bad science. And bad journalism. The good side of it is, like William and myself, I'm stating right now, is just to make sure that you present what is quality information, and that, yeah, it's good to have an opinion, but if you realize that your opinion doesn't align with the facts and data, well, then you need to sit back and reevaluate your opinion.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful point. And I can appreciate that. Yeah, because one of my main requirements of anyone who goes out in the field with me to do research, you have to have an open mind. You have to be able to change your mind. Like if you are so set in your ways and you don't believe Bigfoots are real, whatever, it's okay if you don't believe they're real, but at least be open to changing your mind.
Hmm.
Okay, I have my friend Robbie went out to the field with me a couple of different times, and he didn't believe in orbs. He'd never seen an orb. He said, he's a cop. He said, well, if I ever see one, I will believe it when I see it. Well, guess what? He eventually saw an orb. Okay, he did. I commend him. Okay, so now he believes in it because he saw it. But like many people, and this is the way we all should be. A lot of people, you don't believe it until you see it, until you experience it. Well, why do you think I believe in so much stuff? It's not because I just believe it blindly. It's because I've lived it. I've experienced it, and I'll talk about it. Okay, it took me 10 years to ever talk about any of my research because I got ridiculed by the people I was closest to, okay, by going out and doing my Bigfoot research. So I kept quiet about it. I knew the repercussions of it. I knew how people looked at me and laughed at me and made fun of me about all this. That was almost 15 years ago. Today, it's cool to be a Bigfoot researcher. Back then, it wasn't. Okay, it wasn't. I did kind of keep it under wraps because not everybody is going to support you and your theories and the things that you've seen. Today, it's a little easier for people to accept you. You can actually find your soul tribe today because there's communities of people on YouTube and on the internet that know what you experience and they can understand it. But back, 15 years ago, it was harder to find that personally. But anyways, it's not like remote viewing, okay? Because you were talking about how it's not, your opinion. You can have your opinion, but it may not be fact, right? And so when I'm doing like remote viewing, I've been trained in this for a long time. I've been trained military style. I help find missing people, and I'm given these blind targets. We do utilize remote viewing in the field when we're doing our cryptid field research. Well, here's the thing, like channeling this data, right, for these targets that often involve cryptids like Dogman and Bigfoot. And so we write down the hardcore like data, the sensory data that I'm getting, and then I have a little box where I write down all of what we call analytic overlay. And that's what I think I'm interpreting my sensory data as being. So this is like I've got the sensory data, what I'm really experiencing. I write on the chart. I put it in a box. You put it in a box for a reason. You got to get it out of your head. It may not be what the target is, but it's what you think it might be. Okay, so there's a box for that. You write it down. It just so happens that a lot of times my analytic overlay is the exact target. Okay, because I've been doing this for a long time. My analytic overlay a lot of times is the target. But nonetheless, that little box over there that you put all the analytic overlay in, that's just analytic overlay. It's just what your opinion is of what you're interpreting. And so it's just important to note that 100% describes exactly what you were saying. There's the truth. What do they say? Like, there's your truth, there's my truth,
I
right?
love how you just said
So,
that, and it's so funny because my
yeah.
cousin, who no longer is, he used to be a pretty successful detective that ended up working on like forensic scenes and such. And when I was 11 teen, I just remember him saying that there's always three sides to a story. And I'm like, what do you mean? And what if there's only two people? He goes, what do you mean? Yours, theirs, and the truth. And I was like, oh, geez, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. What do you mean? Like, I'm telling the truth. He goes, yeah, in your eyes, but that's the job of the investigator to figure out because obviously, as we've talked about before, human testimony and what we witness is obviously different, which is why people get into arguments. Hey, you caused the car accident. No, you did, you SOB. But then they go to court and, well, wait a second, it was you that caused the car accident. So, but they both thought they didn't. And that's why it's just really important because, like you said, some people, have to see it to believe it, etc. I'm just super subjective, objective, and a healthy skeptic. I've never had any sort of paranormal activity or anything like that. Only interactions I've had is with some pretty messed up human beings that luckily nothing negative came out of those interactions. But I just try to go with what makes sense first, okay? What starts with science first. And like, for example, before I do let you get going, because I have something else I would love to tell you real quick too. But we had somebody talking how they would go through a certain area and seems like their electronics are always getting zapped and such. And they were saying that they thought something was happening to them. Okay, so which we are not there. We can't fully verify that, but William White, who is a geologist, so he specializes in rocks and things like that, was able to speak about how there was so much magnetic pull in that area because of minerals and sediment, and that in actuality, yeah, with those type of pulls, that it could drain your battery and cause you to have issues with electronics in that certain area. So just things like that. I always try to start with what potentially could make sense first. And then once those things start to not make sense, then I look outside of the box and figure out who should be dealing with it from there. Meaning, if someone gets a hold of us and I think potentially what they saw was a hyena because they said it looked like a hyena and the big mane, even though, they didn't use the term hyena, then I'll sit down and really try to dig into that because I feel pretty confident in that aspect of being able to speak to people about the prehistoric animals that fall into line with this, or even the animals that now, like baboons, bears, all kinds of things. But if someone starts to, speak about things that just don't really seem to add up, that they're adamant that this thing seemed to be like misty and manifested in front of them, but was there but wasn't there, then okay, that doesn't really seem like it falls in line with anything that I would be starting with. Like, was it a large wolf, etc.? So then that's when I would pass it off to somebody like Dennis Carroll, yourself, or people that would really specialize in being able to distinguish now, like what's occurring. And I think people get ticked off sometimes because they will be like, "Oh, Star Fox, well, why didn't you talk to so and so?" And it's like, did you not hear, any of the stuff I always talk about? I try to make sure that's why there's individuals around me that I can send these people in the right direction of, I'm a journalist. That's it. I'm not a scientist, okay? I might be able to reiterate the things my science team says, but I'm not a scientist. I'm not a tracker. So, okay, I can reiterate what you're saying to me and what Nuxium, my tracker, is saying to me. Okay, cool. But I'm still not a tracker. So, it's important to be able to have the people that specialize in that stuff. Someone sends me a crazy picture earlier. The teeth are all gnarly looking, but I don't know. Could have been a squash coyote, could have been a wolf, could have been a combination, but those are some gnarly looking teeth. But I'm not a biologist. I'm not an environmentalist. So I sent it right to my science team. You see what I'm saying? But people seem to get upset about that. But I think that that is what's important because if I was to just sit here and try to specialize in something that I don't feel comfortable in, that's bad science and bad journalism.
I can agree with all of that. And, the guys that I go out and do my research with, a lot of them have been doing this for decades and decades and decades. And we have what I like to refer to as the A team of field researchers out there on all of my teams. I'm on 4 separate teams. Some of the teams overlap, and most of our research is private. We don't really talk about a lot of what we do, but we are equipped with every single different type of scientist, from nuclear physicists to wildlife biologists to doctors and nurses and officials and all that. I don't know, you name it. We've got a big old team of all sorts of stuff, but we're all trained in tracking. We're all survivalists. We've all been hunting Bigfoot for a long time. Okay. Whenever we have something that comes up on the team, not only do we have our team, but we have a network. The great thing about doing all these podcasts and interviewing people from all over the world is that I have access to the best researchers in the entire world. And if I have a question about something, I will send it off to one of my friends, a fellow researcher, and we work it out. We share our research amongst each other, and like I said, we don't always make everything public, because we have ongoing research. It's not really, at this point, it's not meant to be public with a lot of stuff that we're doing. Now, I do have a lot of public research too, though. Okay, I have one team that's public. We have access to data from other teams and experiences. We bring people from other teams into the field, into our research areas with us. Okay, and vice versa. So it's a beautiful thing. Okay, we all have enough wisdom to admit that we don't always have all the answers. We never have all the answers to any of this stuff. Okay, we don't. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody does. I think that's a good takeaway for tonight is that nobody has all the answers, but we all have a lot of experience. And if you have a question about something, if there's ever questions or you are curious about some data or some evidence, hit somebody up that has a lot of experience in it. That's the best way to go about it. I'm very blessed to work with some of the best in the business. Not that this is a business, but you know what I mean. Best in the field, in all the fields.
That is some excellent stuff right there. And I couldn't agree with that better than you stated it. And to wrap this all up, so I did forget to mention that the cynocephali, which I believe are the original origins of the dogmen, did actually, according to Cestius and Herodotus, eat the bodies of fallen soldiers on the field. They did not go out of their way, according to them, to consume humans, but they would take the deceased off the battlefield to eat them. So that's just something else that's really interesting too. And yeah, right. When people get ticked off, I'm a journalist. Okay. So if I'm out there with y'all, right, and someone's like, "Hey, Star Fox, fix the SUV." What, dude? What do you mean? Like, how do I fix what? I'm a journalist. I collect data. Like, oh, hey, Star Fox, what's this deceased looking animal right there? I don't know, dude. That's gnarly, man. Like, that's pretty deceased looking. What, you don't know what that is? No, I'm a journalist, dude. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, there's different aspects of, yeah, if you want to be like, hey, Star Fox, what happened in this area? Or how many encounters are? Oh, yeah, of course, I got that right here. I'm the nerd. I'll pull it all up right there. But I'm just a journalist, dude. Like, I can't do everything else and be successful at it because I'm not that, you know what I mean? If I was a tracker, then sure, I'd speak about tracks, but that's not how it works. And before we let you go, this isn't fully Dogman based, but I know you're gonna love this, and I suggest you look into it because you dive into, numerous cryptids. There are some really smart scientists that have come to almost the point of a theory now, and I believe it's gonna get a little bit more chugging here of how same thing, with the dogman, like you have the baboon kind, you have the hyena type, you have the German Shepherd type, you have the Cynocephala, you have werewolves. It's all kind of dogman, right? So think now of Sasquatch and Bigfoot. That's just a broad term. And a lot of these scientists seem to think you got different variants, meaning some actually are descendants of the Gigantopithecus and actually are apes, which is why you have different behaviors in different areas where people swear that is primate behavior. But then you have others that believe that Neanderthals still exist, but are in very scarce numbers, and we force them into the mountains and such, where up in the mountains, the Yeti and things like that have way different behaviorisms. And then in other areas, they act different as well. So they're still being called Sasquatch and Bigfoot, but we're not just referring to an ape in all of them, or a missing link in all of them, or an uninvolved human necessarily like the Neanderthal. But what's really scary about it is human beings are terrified of anything that looks human. And there is a lot of data to support that the Neanderthals preyed upon humans. So we most likely forced them away from us, okay, into remote areas that we would stay out of. This is messed up, but the parents okayed it. So these children that were unable to speak yet were okayed by their parents. The parents were there. These are little babies, but they would show them images, okay? They would show them images of predators and images of things that were not predators, okay? So if they showed them a snake, a spider, a shark, not all, but they would cry or be scared, okay? But if you showed them like a sheep or a butterfly or something that's not predatory based, they would smile or smirk. And what these scientists were saying is that's because of the way we've evolved, that yes, at this moment we don't have to deal with giant spiders or snakes necessarily unless we're in those environments, but it's been bred into us to fear that, which is why this little kid that has never had a chance to even be told about this has that reaction. And same thing now with people. Why are we so afraid of anything that looks like us? It ties back into our evolution aspects that somewhere along the lines we must have dealt with something that looked very similar to us that was causing us massive tragedy.
Well, I always say that I'm not even scared of Bigfoot and dogmen that much out in the woods. I'm very aware of my surroundings and I'm out there chasing them. It's humans that I worry about. Okay, humans. It's other humans. That would all make sense. I do want to make a note that there have been reports of Neanderthals in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yes, that's why I
Um,
was saying that,
so
because that's still a human, like you said, and they're the frigged up ones.
Well, my question to the person who was reporting that to me, and this was on air, I asked, well, could that be what feral humans are? Is that what people are considering to be feral humans? I think it was Nick Sylvester was on my show. He was like,
Wow.
well, you're labeling it. Okay, really, honestly, there's so many different things in the mountains.
Hmm.
There's so many different subcategories and all these
Hmm.
different types of people and beings and humanoids and all that. You can't just put a label on it, be it like, oh, feral humans are Neanderthals,
Yes,
so many different types.
exactly. But I think we're doing that, not you and I, but just people in general. Like I said, Bigfoot has to be a Bigfoot. Well, potentially, what if it was a Neanderthal, or what if it was an ape, or what if it was some sort of missing link, or same thing with like Dogman when they're like, oh, well, it looked like a giant bear, Bearzilla, but Dogman, like, so yeah, it's super interesting. But I think the more we sit down like we do, and you're always churning out great stuff and speaking to great people, we're definitely getting some sort of clarity, and it will take a little bit, but eventually, sooner than later, when you put a bunch of great minds together, great things come along. So I appreciate you as always taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us. And to the audience, Well, this concludes our session with the Midnight Society. But guess what? Don't worry. We have a massive book. And just because this chapter is over, what makes you think there aren't a gazillion more? So Jessica Jones will be back with us very soon. And again, thank you. And anyone that hasn't tuned into her stuff yet, please go over there, subscribe, check it all out, like, comment. I mean, come on now. And I do have all her links up as always, so it should be pretty easy. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Star Fox. It's always fun.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, share it, comment, and feed the algorithm. And remember, I love the night, and the night loves me. Darkness is my new friend.